It started with the kind of crack you feel in your chest before you register it in your ears. A gunshot close, sharp, too real to mistake for anything else. My heart kicked into overdrive, and I dropped the cardboard box I was carrying right there in the driveway. The air smelled of cut grass and burned powder. HOA Karen was standing in the middle of the cul-de-sac, her round frame hunched, eyes wild, a small black pistol shaking in her hands. She was yelling something about trespassers and danger to the neighborhood. But her voice was more shrill panic than authority. The neighbors were already peeking from behind curtains, but no one dared step outside. We'd had run-ins before, arguments about the color of my fence, the height of my hedges, the number of guests at my 4th of July barbecue, but nothing that prepared me for the sight of her aiming a gun in my direction. I stayed still, both hands open and visible, because you don't make sudden moves when someone's already decided you're the villain in their little play. My wife, Julia, was frozen on the porch behind me, clutching the doorframe. Then came the sirens. Karen had called 911 before firing that shot, and judging by the rising wail in the distance, the cavalry was seconds away. The thing is, this was supposed to be her power move, her big scene where cops would rush in, throw me to the ground, and make her queen of the block again. Only she didn't know one thing. The SWAT commander on rotation today. He was my cousin. The first black armored truck rolled into view, flanked by 2 cruisers. Doors flew open, officers spilling out in perfect formation. And then I heard the sharp, unmistakable voice of Captain Logan Price, family, friend, and the guy who taught me to shoot when I was 16. He didn't even aim at me. He strode right past, eyes locked on Karen, whose gun hand started to droop like maybe she just realized she wasn't the hero here. "Ma'am, drop the weapon." "Now," Logan barked. Karen hesitated, lips tightening. "You're here for him. He's dangerous, threatening our entire HOA. Logan didn't even blink. "I've known this man 20 years. I trust him with my life. You? I don't know. And right now, you're the only one holding a firearm in a residential street." The gun hit the asphalt with a clatter. 2 SWAT officers moved in, zip-tying her wrists while she shrieked about bylaws, emergency powers, and something about defending the community. Logan turned to me, shaking his head. "You okay, Sam?" I nodded, still trying to slow my pulse. She fired once. Missed. "Julia's inside." He waved an EMT over to check her, then leaned in so only I could hear. "This isn't just about today. We've been watching this HOA for weeks. Fraud, extortion, misuse of funds, you name it. You just gave us the probable cause we needed to move in." That's when I saw them, half a dozen more officers fanning out toward the HOA clubhouse at the end of the street. They moved fast, clearing the building, hauling out box after box of files and hard drives. A man in a suit I recognized from the county's fraud unit was barking orders. Neighbors were gathering now, phones out, recording everything. Some were whispering, some outright cheering. Karen was still yelling from the back of a patrol car when her vice president, a wiry guy named Ted, tried to slip away down the side alley. Bad move. One of the SWAT guys spotted him and gave chase, tackling him before he'd made it halfway. The crowd gasped, and a few folks started muttering about finally getting what they deserve. That's when the twist landed. One of the boxes pulled from the clubhouse had my name on it. Logan opened it right there in front of me, revealing a fat folder labeled "Surveillance Subject, Sam Carter." Inside were printed photos of my house, my wife, even my teenage son walking home from school. Dates, times, notes about possible code violations that were clearly fabricated. My stomach turned cold. "They've been tracking you," Logan said grimly. "Looks like you weren't the only one. We'll get everyone their files back." For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the one under siege. I watched as the same neighbors who'd kept their heads down in past disputes now stepped forward, telling officers about fines they'd paid in cash, safety inspections that were really shakedowns, and threats for speaking out. The whole rotten core of the HOA was spilling out onto the pavement. Karen's face, pale behind the cruiser's glass, was a study in disbelief. She'd gone from self-appointed sheriff to the villain of her own story in less than an hour. The more she shouted, the smaller she seemed until finally she just slumped back against the seat, eyes fixed on some point far away. The neighborhood looked different that night, like the air had been scrubbed clean. The SWAT trucks rolled out one by one, leaving behind the hum of whispered conversations and the flashing red and blue reflections fading off the windows. Karen's cruiser stayed parked for a while, an unintentional monument to everything she'd built her little empire on: control, fear, and the illusion of untouchable authority. Now she was the one trapped behind glass. Logan stayed behind with a small team, walking the length of the street and knocking on doors. I followed him for a bit, hearing stories spill out that made my blood run hot. Mrs. Kelly from 3 houses down admitted she'd been fined $500 for unauthorized landscaping after planting a rose bush outside her fence. Jack Ramirez, a retired firefighter, said Karen had tried to force him to move his vintage truck from his own driveway, threatening legal action if he didn't comply. And then there was the Malersa young couple who'd been told their backyard playset violated aesthetic standards and would need to be removed immediately. None of it had any basis in law. At the clubhouse, the fraud unit was still going through the piles of seized records. One detective pulled me aside. "You might want to see this." He handed me another folder from the surveillance subject stack. This one wasn't about Mike, was about Logan. They'd been following him too, compiling a list of his visits to the area, even tracking his wife's work schedule. I handed it over to him, watching his jaw tighten. "Guess I'm more involved in your HOA drama than I thought," he said dryly. By morning, the news vans had arrived. They set up on the corner, filming stand-ups with the clubhouse in the background. Reporters gesturing toward the police tape and half-empty file boxes stacked by the door. The headline on the noon broadcast read, "Local HOA president arrested on fraud and assault charge, state investigation underway." The county prosecutor moved fast. Karen was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment, conspiracy to commit fraud, and multiple counts of harassment. Ted, her vice president, faced similar charges, plus resisting arrest. The state's attorney general's office announced a formal audit of every HOA in the county. I showed up for Karen's arraignment 2 weeks later, not out of spite but because I wanted to see the look on her face when the charges were read aloud. She was in an orange jumpsuit, her once perfect hair pulled back in a limp ponytail. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on me, and for a second I saw it confusion, like she still couldn't quite piece together how she'd lost control of the narrative. The judge set her bail high enough to keep her in custody, citing her as a flight risk and a danger to the community. The room erupted into quiet murmurs. When we filed out into the hallway, a local reporter stuck a microphone in my face. "Sam, how does it feel knowing your call to the police led to the dismantling of an entire HOA?" I shook my head. "I didn't dismantle anything. They did it to themselves. I just stopped letting them push me around." Over the next month, the fallout spread like a brush fire. The state audit uncovered misuse of nearly $250,000 in HOA funds, including payments to shell companies Karen controlled. Homeowners who'd been too afraid to speak up before started filing claims for reimbursement. The entire board resigned or was arrested, and the county moved to dissolve the HOA entirely. When the trial came, it was packed. Testimony lasted for days, neighbors recounting threats, police officers detailing the evidence, and even former board members turning on Karen to save themselves. The prosecution played the SWAT bodycam footage of her waving that pistol around in the cul-de-sac. The jury's faces were stone. It took them just 4 hours to return a verdict. Guilty on all counts. The judge didn't hold back, sentencing her to 10 years in state prison without parole for the assault, plus consecutive terms for the fraud charges. She was also ordered to repay the stolen funds in full. The day she was led out of the courtroom, shackled and silent, the neighborhood erupted in cheers outside. It wasn't joy at her suffering, it was relief. The kind that comes when a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying is suddenly gone. In the weeks that followed, we rebuilt what she tried to control. The community clubhouse became a shared space again, but this time without fines or threats. People landscaped their yards how they wanted. Kids rode bikes in the street without being told they were disrupting the peace. And weekend barbecues started popping up again. One Saturday evening, Logan came over with his family. We grilled on the back deck, the lake reflecting the last light of day. He raised a glass. "Here's to standing your ground," he said, "and to never underestimating how fast arrogance can bring someone down." I smiled, thinking back to that first deafening crack in the street, to Karen's face as the SWAT surrounded her. "Here's to peace and quiet," I replied. "Long may it last." So now I'll ask you, was I right to stay calm and let the SWAT handle her? Or should I have stepped in sooner when she pulled that trigger?